Right, so as has become customary for Israel throughout any ceasefire it seemingly agrees to, how much the ceasefire is worth and how well it holds are pretty much counted in how many times Israel get away with breaching it without any consequences ever being felt. This morning, as Israel continues to dodge talks over the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire, they breached it in a truly depraved manner. A strike in Rafah becoming breaking news not only because of who were targeted, but what they were doing when they were targeted. Such an egregious act, in fact, that it prompted an almost immediate response from Hamas to call it out. But of course, mainstream media have completely ignored this, still discussing the release and condition of the 3 Israeli hostages released by Hamas yesterday. Less interested, of course, in the condition of the 369 Palestinian hostages that were released as well. Prisoners, as they get called, though, despite 333 of those Israel released having been held completely without charge. So hostages then. The mainstream media is managing to become even worse and even more one-sided after all the time that has passed, after everything we have seen. Propaganda, as it has become in which case. Rotten shame if I tell the other side then, isn't it? Right, so as the mainstream media fixates on the hostage releases that took place yesterday, having gone off largely without a hitch as they did, though Hamas coming in for much criticism all the same for their parading around of the 3 Israelis, as the media put it, but nothing said of the Palestinian hostages so much, which is exactly what they are, being released having been forced to wear clothing sporting the Star of David, along with the slogan reading, "We will never forget, we will never forgive," turning the symbol of Judaism and Jewish identity into a symbol of humiliation, a symbol of Israeli abuse, and a symbol of illegal detention, once again endangering Jewish people around the world as such action does. Israel is literally the biggest danger to Jewish people that there is, through actions such as this, and I make no apologies for saying that. But whilst this happened yesterday and it still dominates mainstream media outlets this morning, we have to move on from this because this morning Israel committed an horrendous breach of the Gaza ceasefire that is so serious it risks doing real harm to the entire ceasefire agreement. It takes us to Rafah on the Gaza-Egyptian border, where, as recent viewers of this channel will know, there is a lot of trucks waiting to enter Gaza with all manner of mobile homes for shelter and heavy plant machinery for moving rubble coming from Egypt. Egypt basically shaming Israel for not having allowed such aid in, but only if you've heard about it. As aid agencies, foreign media and independent media like me remain basically the only entities pointing this out. Well, Netanyahu, to no surprise to anyone whatsoever, or shouldn't be anymore, is still barring this kind of aid from getting in. A statement today reiterating the fact he does not want to allow these mobile homes and this heavy plant machinery into the Gaza Strip in flagrant violation of the agreement. But even when aid has reached Rafah, that's no guarantee Israel will even allow it to be delivered. This morning, despite the ceasefire that still supposedly remains in place, 2 Palestinian police officers were killed and a 3rd critically injured after Israeli shelling struck Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip, according to Palestinian authorities. The Gaza Interior Ministry confirmed the casualties in a statement, explaining that the officers were stationed in the Al-Shouka area, east of Rafah, to ensure the safe delivery of humanitarian aid when they were hit. The officers were part of a deployment specifically tasked with facilitating the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza, all outlined in the ceasefire agreement, as this is, between Hamas and Israel, and yet Israel has still deliberately targeted them on top of accusations aimed at already for Israel for violating the terms of the agreement and obstructing the flow of essential aid, including the aforementioned shelter and machinery. This, on top of that, is just the actions of a force determined to bring the ceasefire to an end, isn't it? But the media, ignoring it completely, more people will not be aware of this, so we need to speak up about it. Well, as you might imagine, though, a group who absolutely will have had something to say about this are Hamas. I did already say they've had something to say, after all. But the terrorist group, as they are deemed, condemned the killing of police officers that Israel have committed. So when will we start calling Israel terrorists as well, then, in which case? The day hell freezes over with our Western governments, and the media, of course, mainstream. At any rate, though, Hamas have not minced their words in their statement, which appears to imply the 3rd police officer has since died as well. The treacherous attack carried out by a Zionist drone this morning east of Rafah, targeting police officers responsible for securing the entry of aid, resulting in the martyrdom of 3 of them, constitutes a grave violation of the ceasefire agreement. This crime, along with this breach of the ceasefire, adds to the occupation's ongoing refusal to uphold the terms of the agreement. The latest example of this was the occupation's statement today, declaring that it will not allow the entry of mobile homes and heavy machinery, despite previously committing to do so and informing mediators of this agreement at the end of last week. Additionally, the occupation has been stalling the start of negotiations for the second phase of the agreement, further proving its lack of seriousness in adhering to the deal brokered by mediators and witnessed by the world. This also exposes the intentions of war criminal Netanyahu, who seeks to obstruct the agreement, derail prisoner exchange efforts, and resume aggression while committing more acts of genocide. As we strongly condemn this brutal crime and all violations of the agreement and humanitarian protocol, we hold the occupation fully responsible for the consequences. We also call on the mediators to fulfill their responsibilities by ensuring that the Zionist enemy abides by all its commitments, intervenes to stop its repeated ceasefire violations, and enforces the full implementation of the humanitarian protocol, while immediately initiating negotiations for the second phase. And so it continues then. Israel are not serious about engaging with the ceasefire plan still, to no surprise really, and remain accused of evading negotiations for the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire plan as well, and committing criminal acts such as those described here on top, continuing to block aid into Gaza too, and all of that on top of delaying commitments to key ceasefire terms, such as a full withdrawal of troops from Gaza and a permanent end to hostilities. They are doubling down on such matters. A speech given today jointly between Netanyahu and Trump's Secretary of State Marco Rubio, underlining Israel's determination to rout Hamas completely, whilst again changing the remit of the ceasefire deal, with phase 2 due to see the release of all remaining hostages, as that is supposed to be about. Yet Israel now want all hostages held by Hamas to be released as a condition to move on to the second phase. Certainly we want all those hostages released, but that goes for both sides here. And when Israel is still taking hostages as they raise the West Bank, they are hardly honest brokers when they are releasing hostages. And Hamas are hardly going to give up what leverage they have for there to even be a second phase, which of course there won't be regardless of what they do, because Hamas, as much as anyone paying attention to the reality of what is happening between Israel and Gaza these days during this ceasefire, will know Netanyahu can never agree to phase 2 anyway. It will collapse his government if he did, and he will do anything to remain in power and avoid that. So phase 2 just is not going to happen. Yet still he is prepared to help that cessation of the ceasefire along, to hurry it up, it seems, by abusing that to which he's already agreed to, undermining his own, what his word is worth, if it's worth much of anything at all at this point. Hamas can appeal to the mediators, of course they can, but that's largely going to fall on deaf ears as well, isn't it? The US are mediators for a start, yet their Secretary of State is an avowed Christian Zionist and Trump is Netanyahu's bestie. Waste of time. The US should be nowhere near mediation on the matter of the ceasefire. They also tie the hands of the UN, of course, vetoing anything that goes against Israel at the UN Security Council. The UN also mediators in this. Egypt are trying to get aid, and of course, as I've already mentioned and previously covered in other content, whilst trying to stop Netanyahu and Trump ethnically cleansing Gazans their way at the same time, and their mediation efforts, much like their fellow Arab mediators in Qatar, are falling on deaf ears too, prepared to negotiate that second phase, but Israel just don't show up. Too busy breaching the first phase, as they are, denying aid and unaliving those trying to distribute it, even when that is the police. What are you to do? Well, we can all play our part. Share the fact that Israel are, again, the culprits when it comes to this atrocity. Ensure the finger of blame is pointed squarely at them for this, their dishonesty. They're the ones breaching the ceasefire. And criticise those media outlets and those politicians spinning the truth like crazy or completely ignoring it because they're compromised. Share the foreign media articles telling the truth. Even Israeli media itself is often more honest than ours here in the West. But when this ceasefire collapses, as I fear is inevitable, the blame must be placed on those who are truly responsible. Israel, Netanyahu, and Western mediators who ardently favour one side over the other, are not impartial, are completely biased, and incidents like this one that we've seen this morning in Rafa that they ignore, they need to be asked why they're ignoring it. Netanyahu and Rubio have also been opining deeply on the matter of Iran too, still obsessed with them allegedly developing nuclear weapons, despite that nation having a fatwa in place forbidding it. and Iran have made their feelings vociferously felt in return. Not that you will have got much wind of that either. Check out that side of the story, though, in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe before you do so, though, so as to ensure you don't miss out on new daily content on this channel, as well as helping to support it at the same time, which is very much appreciated, of course. And it will hopefully, therefore, catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.